Thank you for joining us at our MLK event, Black Voices in Rosemount. At a time when race discrimination, segregation, and oppression surges through the veins of Americans and veins of America, the speech "I Have a Dream" was delivered to the nation by a person whose aim was to change the way Black people were viewed in society and upturn the social hierarchy, some that everyone may live equally. The speech enlightened those who were under the false sense of security and violence condoned by the white people upon blacks. During this time of turmoil, the speech served as a beacon of hope that allows some blacks to endure injustice forced upon them. Martin Luther King Jr., the man with a dream, delivered the passionate speech to thousands of eyes yearning for solace, and each word he spoke played some part in this speech. Abundant with metaphors, allusions, tone, the speech was essential in lighting the sparks in hearts of every American so that we may have courage to rise up against wrongdoers, and doing so unite us together as one nation. One quote from Dr. King was, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And so with that, I'd like to start with introducing our panel. If you could please give a quick introduction, give your name, where you grew up, where you live in the area now, and what you do for work, and anything else you seem to think is important.
Grantham, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Grantham Green. I'm a 10th grader at Rosemount High School. Still live with my family, only 15, still a minor, still a baby in some eyes, but I don't really do much other than this. I work with my superintendent of the district in an equity advisory council to discuss equity issues in our district and help work on different plans to put in place to make our district and our schools a lot more inclusive and diverse, and really that's just my main goal, our main goal, and really our prime go-getter right now.
That's great. Good evening, everybody. My name is Erin Mae Quaid. I use she, her pronouns. I was born and raised in Apple Valley, so not Rosemount. Don't kick me out. And I still live there today with my wife and our two rescue dogs, Jeffers and Soda. I went to Greenleaf and Falcon and Eastview. I went to St. Thomas for college, and I have done my work in community organizing. I was the state representative that represented the other half of the district that we are in right now, 57A, in the state legislature from 2017 to 2019. I was a candidate for lieutenant governor. I worked for our now Attorney General, then Congressman Keith Ellison. None of this is in order. I worked for Barack Obama right out of college, getting him elected to president. And today I work for Gender Justice, which is a nonprofit organization and legal nonprofit that seeks to advance gender equity through the law. So I do a lot of work with race and gender and law and making sure that we all have the society that our founders really put down into the Constitution that we haven't quite achieved yet.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jacob Del Pino II. I grew up in Rosemount since I was 8 years old. Went to Shannon Park Elementary School, to Rosemount Middle, to Rosemount High School. My parents still currently live in the same house I grew up in. Myself, I live in Lakeville with my two wonderful children, my daughter and my son. Currently, I am in the works of working with Rosemount High School on a type of equity program, which we're extremely excited about, and I know it's going to do great things for the community and the children within it. I'm also a football coach for Rosemount High School. Go Irish. We are #1 in state, no matter what the polls say. With that, I'm also on a nonprofit board that is very dear to our heart, that I've been part for 3 years. It's called Reaching Up, based out of Easter Church off of Cliff and Pilot Knob, and where we just simply give homework help every day to students that need a little bit more assistance. So it's been very tough in that area due to the current social settings with COVID. So if you're looking for a great foundation, Reaching Up is a great one. If you're looking to volunteer, Also a great one to help some kids out with some homework help. And we also provide meals for them. So, yes, thank you for having us and watching.
No, I will answer that question myself. I do apologize. Let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Kreider. I also do live in Rosemount. I am not originally from Rosemount. I am from a small little town in the middle of Minnesota called Sauk Center, which is where I grew up. But my family does live here in Rosemount. I work for the college here in town, so I work for Toyota County Technical College, where I am also involved in our equity and inclusion on campus. And as you know, I work with a lot of the students that, as this young gentleman will eventually come to be a college student at some point, and actually I do have a lot of involvement with high school students as they get ready on that path for college. So, moving on. So, as a child, do you recall when you first became aware of your race? Was it negative, neutral, or a positive moment?
I would say when I first became aware of my race, it wasn't necessarily the color of my skin, rather than more of the context of my body and the say of my hair. I remember back in 3rd, 2nd grade, I was like, Mom, Dad, why isn't my hair straight? Why isn't it like Mom's? Why doesn't my curls and hair not lay like everyone else's? And I was so frustrated. I was like, Mom, straighten my hair. I want my hair to lay like this. I'm like, why is it not laying like that? Like, like everyone else's, like my predominantly white school that I go to. Mm-hmm. And at the time, it wasn't negative or positive. It was more of just, something I noticed, something I didn't like about myself. But as a kid, you don't like a lot of things about yourself. You don't really pay attention to that. But growing up, I now see it as a very positive experience, because the thing that I do hold, or something that I hold dear to myself, is, my hair. It's who I am. It's my curls, my afro. I wake up every day, I protect them, I oil them, and it's something that is true to me and who I am as a Black man in today's society. And to see that I wanted to constantly change my hair just goes to show how oppressive and how much we always want to fit in, when really we want to focus on how much we want to stand out.
Well, we could have a whole separate conversation about biracial children and their Black hair, and I really actually would love to have that conversation. My mom always tells the story, so I'm Black biracial, my dad is Black, my mom is white, and she always tells the story that when I was really young, I would say, Dad is Black, Mom is white, and I'm tan. But I remember the first time that I understood that Blackness was dangerous. I was like 7, 8 maybe. Air Jordans had just come out. So this is gonna date my father more than it is gonna date me. And he had bought, they were like, you could pump up the sneaker with like the basketball and the thing. And my dad would play basketball at the community center in Apple Valley, and he bought them at the Burnsville Mall. And one of the sneakers didn't pump. And so one of the guys that he played basketball with is like, oh, you can go back and just like exchange them for either one shoe or both shoes. And so my dad brought me and my brother back to the Burnsville Mall to exchange them at like this Foot Locker. And he was like, yeah, man, like one of these shoes doesn't work. Can I just like exchange the whole pair, just like get one that fits? And this guy was like, no. Did you steal those? Like, what did you do with these shoes? And he said, Aaron, take your brother outside. And I was like, okay. So we're standing and I can hear the guy yelling the N-word at my dad. And he sounded so angry. And I was waiting for my dad to like pull the thing that he does when we're acting up, like yell back. And he was like, all right, I'm gonna leave. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I've seen angry dad. How come he's not angry? And it was the first time I realized, like, oh my gosh, I'd asked my dad, what does the N-word mean? And he had to like tell me what it meant. And then also like what it would mean for me. And so, I was deeply young, and I think the thing that I always want to say is that so often Black children definitely know what it means to be Black, but white children aren't told that. They aren't told what racism is and how to stop doing it. And I think so often we want to protect children who don't experience racism from how harmful racism is. It's not protecting them. All it is reinforcing white supremacy and making sure it perpetuates on. But so for me, it was not super positive. It was really scary.
Thank you. For myself, I was roughly about 4 or 5. Almost remember it like it was yesterday. The color car was green. My brother and I were walking somewhere in Egan where we lived on the sidewalk, and a vehicle of two men, two white gentlemen, drove by and threw a bottle at us while screaming the N-word out. Being 4 and 5, I thought the N-word was like a football team. So I was like, yeah, like, let's go. Until I went home and realized, after I told my parents what the N-word was. Personally, I don't think I really understood the depth of that word and like the hatred behind it, and unfortunately, until I moved to Rosemount, our home here. So 3rd grade in Shannon Park, I was called it consistently on the playground. But there's a happy ending to the story, and I'm sure he might be watching it. But the young man at the time, he was a boy at the time, but he's an amazing man right now. He became one of my very best friends. He was the one that continuously said the word to me. Obviously, it wasn't a learned action from himself. He learned it from somewhere. But throughout the years, he became close with my father. I became close with his father. And it just shows that even young children, as education, when you get more in touch with the unknown and become more known and more appreciation, how that can bond. And I'm very appreciative of the moment and for the learning lesson. But as a young child, as you mentioned, it cuts deep because you feel alone. You feel alone, especially in some of the demographics that you're dealing with in the suburbs for young black children.
My story is a little bit different. As I said before, I grew up in the middle of Minnesota, and during a different time, and when I tell this story, I mean, don't disrespect, my parents took me in from where my life could have went a different way. I'm adopted, so my parents are white. I grew up in a white society. And during that time, this takes you back into the 70s, 80s. There wasn't as much diversity. There wasn't as much diversity in smaller towns as you may see today. And so I honestly think a lot of my discovery, my family, my parents taught me how to be a man. I don't think they taught me how to be a black man. I think that was something I had to figure out on my own. And so I would probably say, somewhere around my 17, 18, 19 years of age is where I learned a lot of that. I remember this trip, I was in German class, and we went to Festival of the Nations. And again, remember, like I said, I come from a small town, so yeah, we're making a trip to the cities. That was, those were big events for us. And so, I'm walking around with my friends. I had a girlfriend at the time, and a lot of people would go by and like, why are you with her? Why wouldn't I be? I don't know. These are my friends. I grew up with them all my life. I was adopted at the age of 4, so it was really the main stable home I had and what I knew. And so I don't know. I just kind of thought it was weird that people thought that was weird that I'm walking with these people I've known all my life. I mean, but a lot of what I learned about as far as being a black man, I learned shortly after graduating high school. When I graduated high school, I left for the Marine Corps. And so, I saw many different people, many different walks of life, and learned a lot more about the world, and not that I didn't learn those things as a kid, but, kind of when you get outside your shell, kind of when you get outside that bubble and kind of see life, and I saw a lot of different things that was very unfamiliar to me. And so, I think that was a lot of my learning, as where I was trying to figure out who am I really, I think that was probably the beginning of the change. I always believed that, I still believe to this day that I'm still taking to school sometimes. So, I believe that you're always learning, we're always evolving, and, it's important that we always remain open to that. So, but I think that's when a lot of things started to kind of become more prevalent to me. Please share a story or two, if you wish, that represents an experience, your experience living in Rosemount area as a person of color.
You know, I struggled with this question because it's really hard to describe an experience that describes what it's like to just be who you are, right? It's like, use a, story to describe what it's like to have curly hair. Like, I don't really know what that story is. And being black is just part of who I am. So instead of maybe answering the question, I just want to say Juneteenth of 2020 was the first time that I experienced like the full blackness of myself in the city of Apple Valley. And it was the most amazing, incredible experience. And Jake was there. Grantham, I don't know if you were there. It was incredible. And I just remember thinking, like, it could always be like this. Like, we could have black joy, black excellence, and black love this publicly everywhere. And so I want that to be my example of what it's like to be a person of color in this area. It hasn't been, but I want it to be.
Kind of in
Go ahead.
contradiction to you, I think what it was like being black in Rosemount is an experience, but being black in Rosemount was, for me, I'm gonna say a privilege, because as much as I feel like us as black people don't talk about it, there is a privilege that some of us have. And mine was going to this predominantly white school, but then still being able to hold on to my blackness and hold on to my power and intelligence. And I'll call myself the token black man as I sit here as a 15-year-old with you amazing adults. It's what my experience is I was still, seen as black, seen as African American, but I was seen as intelligent, which people didn't, use. Those weren't synonyms, People wouldn't often describe black and intelligent as together. I remember I was having a discussion with an older black man in one of my equity advisory councils, and he goes, Grantham, wow, you're really well-spoken. But he's like, what that's saying is, wow, Grantham, you're really white. And that is a very good example of we so often, or society so often tries to say black people can't be this, can't be that, but the second they're intelligent and like that, and so much more than what they paint them out to be, then they're not black anymore. And growing up in Rosemount, a predominantly white school, my blackness was tested every day I walked through the hall. Grantham, are you even black enough? Isn't your mom white? Yeah, she's white. That makes me any less. Yep. It's just a names and lists just go on. And what I've learned and what I don't feel like a lot of people grasp, and I'm lucky enough to, sit there and self-dissect a lot, is I will never ask for anyone's respect. I will demand it. I am not entitled to anything less because of my race. And that is something that took me a little bit to understand and to grasp, but I'm so happy I am.
And I don't want to interrupt, Jake.
No, go ahead.
One of the things I'm so glad for, like, we had no community analysis of race when I was in high school, which, like, wasn't that long ago. Like, it was a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. Eastview's not that old, meaning I'm not that old. But, I mean, it's just... really, truly, like, it's incredible and amazing to me that is an experience that youth in this community get to have, because I didn't get to be black when I was in school. It was like, I got to be like the black friend, right? But I never got to be my full self. Not in school, not in choir, not in the musicals, not in, class. And that's really only something I've gotten to do in our community as an adult in my 30s. And I'm so glad that that's something that youth get to experience in school.
I agree, and I absolutely want to mirror both of you. First and foremost, with the Juneteenth event that was held in Apple Valley, not only was it just amazing to see so many different colors of black being out there, but so many different shades of white as well. And it did feel like a melting pot in a community. And it felt good to just relax and have the smell of barbecue in the background, music
my
playing,
auntie.
right? The electric slide going on, and everyone participating and just enjoying it, especially this year, right? With everything that's going on. Secondly, Grant, you hit the nail on the head. You're spot on. I so much appreciate growing up in Rosemount, especially at a young age, and being one of the first black families to grow up in Rosemount. Because what I learned really quickly, not only was it was the white people that made it hard for me to be an educated black man, it was the black people that made it hard for me to be an educated black man. Because at that time, there were a few families that came from out of town, from Chicago, where life was a little bit tougher from the city they came from. And so they had some childhood drama that they were still battling with. And the mere fact that I couldn't dress well, speak well, and play all the sports I've played and enjoy all the different types of genres of music I enjoy without being pigeonholed in one area. I don't know if sellout is the word anymore that they use, but we got called sellout, Oreo. And so it was really hard because knowing from where my family grew up, which is my mom, North Carolina, Greensboro, and my grandfather marched with Martin Luther King, right? I can't wear a T-shirt that says all my black history, right? I can't wear that. So how do I portray that as a young man? But what I'm so thankful for of Rosemount was the community that my parents taught me well enough that association brings on assimilation, right? So I made sure that the friends I did choose were about the right thing. And I also knew that any hiccup I had in my behavior or in my decisions would probably shine a little bit brighter on myself than my friends. So I made sure at a young age to learn the lesson that I'm held to a higher standard. And my parents drilled that. And maybe it's changing today, maybe it's not. But I still hold to those rules that I can't be just as good, right? I can't go to the same parties and act the same way as my friends do. Because if something happens, sometimes as a black man, you get 1 strike versus 3 or 4. And it wasn't worth it for me to test that theory. But I did learn that by doing the right thing and by holding myself accountable, that this community embraced me, they embraced my family, they loved me, they loved my family, and still to this day, I have clients and friends and neighbors that take care of my family, and they take care of me, they take care of my children. And it's because that even though we go through these trials and tribulations, we stay true to ourselves. And it's staying the course and it's being consistent of doing the right things and having the right morals. And when you live that way and you don't let the outside pressures of what you should be or what they portray you as because they're watching too much MTV Raps, you don't know that. That was back in our day.
I know MTV.
MTV Raps, that was the jam. But because we're not acting like 50 Cent or Tupac back then and Biggie, that if you stay the course of doing the right thing and have the spirit, your community is going to take care of you. And so that's the largest lesson that I learned with Rosemount is that I had to learn racism really fast. And then I had to learn how to deal with racism even faster. Because, thunder and lightning only get so many times before thunder and lightning's in cuffs. I learned that extremely fast, and I'm blessed for it. So with the trials and tribulations, the good overflows and outweighs the bad that I've learned in this community. And I like to portray it to my children as well. So.
And to echo what you're saying, my involvement in Rosemount has been, later in my life. And so, a lot of it I do live through my children. And so, my biggest worry was, reception, welcome, how would they be perceived? My children are biracial, and I mean, I've lived places where there was times I didn't know my own neighbors. People didn't speak to you. I mean, they looked at you funny. You walk to the grocery store, people look at what are you really doing here? I remember at an event, I was going to one of my kids' soccer games, dropped him off at the field, and nobody's in the store, but there's a guy stocking in the back room that makes a point that comes out of the stock room to ask if he can help me with anything. What's wrong with the 3 people at the counter? They didn't ask me anything. So I mean, our move into Rosemount was, I wasn't sure how to, and the best thing about it was that we were welcomed with open arms. When we moved here, my neighbor came out, just rattling off. I kind of got the rundown of the neighborhood in about 5 minutes. But I mean, all the way through. I mean, even for like the first year, people would just stop by. Hey, how are you doing? Shaking hands. I mean, and that was comforting to me. Because in my neighborhood, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think there is 2 black families in my community, maybe 3. I mean, that made me feel good. That made me feel like, okay, I guess the best way to say it, like, all right, this is gonna work out fine. I mean, I'm gonna like it here,
Yep.
And like I said, I grew up in a small town, and one thing that I do love about it is I do love the small town feel. And I mean, I grew up knowing, this person, that person. I mean, just you knew the people around you. Everybody knew Ken to everybody. I mean, it's always kind of funny. The story I commonly tell was, I'd be, driving through town. I don't go home very often, but I'd take my dad's truck and go run whatever errand my mom needed, and people be waving like, it's just like, they recognize his truck. They really can't tell that's who's who, but it was just everybody was comfortable with everybody, and that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted for myself. I just wanted to feel welcomed, and I got that when I moved into Rosemount. I didn't have that everywhere else. It was people kept their distance, people looked odd, or you walk into the store, it's almost like almost that look like, why are you here? So in your own words, what is a microaggression, and how does it differ? If it does indeed differ from a blatant racism.
Go ahead and take it, Aaron.
So microaggressions, well, I don't believe in micro versus macroaggressions. That's the first thing. We had a vocab list that I think we shared out, so I'm just going to read what it says about microaggressions.
Okay.
The verbal, nonverbal, and environmental slights, snubs, insults, or belittlement, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely upon discriminatory belief systems. So we all live in white supremacy. Black folks do, brown folks do, indigenous folks do, white people, we all live in white supremacy. That is the norm, that is what we do every day. Interrupting that is what takes the work. So doing nothing is just upholding that. And microaggressions, right, the slights, the snubs, all of those just seek to remind you that we in fact live in a racial caste system, a racial hierarchy in which you as a black person, a person of color, live below white people. And so it's not micro, that's very macro. It reminds you of the system of oppression that you live in constantly. And then oftentimes microaggressions are used in order to justify reinforcing that system of oppression. So I'll give you a really good example. When I was in 4th grade, I have always been a curious person. I ask a lot of questions. I just love to learn things and know things, and I have been that way my whole life. And when I was in 4th grade, my 4th grade teacher pulled me out of SAC, school-age childcare, so I went to daycare at school. She pulled me out of SAC to show me what my report card was ahead of parent-teacher conferences. And she told me that I didn't deserve the E's on my report card because I was disrespectful. And I was like, but why? You're always asking me questions. You always want to know. You're always talking in class. And I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, I was, in 4th grade, whatever age you are in 4th grade. I felt like crap. I knew she didn't like me.
Yep.
And I knew why, but I didn't have the word for it. I didn't have the analysis for it, but I knew why she didn't like me. And this past year, before the COVID times, I was in New York City. I was at a conference, and my boss introduced me to someone that she went to college with who was from Apple Valley. And he had that same teacher. He's a person of color. And we were talking about our elementary school, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm my 4th grade teacher. And he said, is it so-and-so? And I was like, yeah. And he had the same experience, and I actually cried because 4th grade me knew why, but like being an adult and having another adult affirm that the crappy way I was treated, just it wasn't me, was validating. And it was a microaggression to tell a black child that she is disrespectful because she's mouthy, because she asks questions. So microaggressions are not different from macroaggressions. White supremacy is harmful to all of us. White people, black people, brown people, it's harmful to all of us. It is holding all of us back. And I don't want us to categorize the way in which we are reminded of the system of oppression through small ways as like not big, right? That's how I think about microaggressions.
As always, I think we're always going to second each other and third each other on this panel. With the light of the word and the question and the theory of it, the largest, I would say, the irritation of a microaggression that I have experienced in a general sense is in a conversation of someone being white and the phrase saying, as they comment on what irritates them about certain colors of people and certain actions, okay? So even though they're not reflecting it to me and saying that I'm like that, and then they back it up with saying, but you're one of the good ones. That is not a compliment. Let me phrase again. You're one of the good ones is not a compliment. So by doing that to any particular person for any state, it is micro, macro, to the full bluntness of saying that they have true issues. And only because myself as an individual and me, and they have a personal relationship with me. But now I know that what they look at in the store and how they view me if they didn't know it was me. And I know I mentioned this when we spoke earlier, not in front of cameras, but on our side. And I think it compiles very well within this. Having a mask on in society really, really, really makes it tough to disarm people. So one of the microaggressions that you no longer can show your smile to show that you're not a threat. And it is an uncomfortable feeling to know that something you've done for your whole life to show someone in the store, someone on the sidewalk, that you are not a threat with a smile is taking away from you due to the current mask situation. I think I've experienced most micro, macro, racist feelings in society. And I'm a very people person of hundreds of clients in the fitness world, and I know body energy and feelings. And it's still something that I have to deal with, that I have to come to terms with, which I am, and I will. But on that topic, I think it's a big one that rears its ugly head, that the one thing that black men and black women have had to do for generations, I guess decades and centuries, to disarm, to show that they're not a non-threat in society, is now sidelined by COVID-19. So it's my end.
I think for me, and the part that that stuck out from your speech right there was the part where, conversations with white people and the phrase or, along the lines of, you're not like other black people. Oh, you're in for an interesting conversation when, those lines get thrown out. But also, growing up queer is you're not like other gay people. Oh, thank you. Like, please elaborate. And it's just, and for example, my father and I were listening to a comedy radio. Frankly, I hate comedy radio. I'm gonna just put that out there because I think it is just a lot of offensive stuff that people just try to laugh about. And this guy's opening statement was, I have a lot of gay friends, but it bothers me when, gay people are like this. And it's like, really? And I feel like there's always this constant statement of, I have a lot of black friends. I have, I stand with my black people. But I don't like when they do X, Y, and Z.
That word "but," right?
Mm-hmm.
Just disregard everything in front of that.
Doing a lot of work there.
And I just think if I felt any microaggressions, it's when people are trying to sit there and compliment me, but it's the most backhanded feeling ever.
Yes.
And I think that is where a lot of my microaggressions have come from in my life.
I split this up a little bit. So the second part of this was, on the flip side, please give an example of how you've experienced allyship, how people can be an ally in this situation.
I'll hit this one. I know we had a rally in Rosemount, an event this summer, and one of my good friends, Pastor Chris, she lives in Rosemount, and her kids have gone through the Rosemount schooling system, and one of her child's still in it. But for that rally to take place, they spearheaded that whole movement. They did all the legwork, they set it up, and she asked me if my family would be interested in starting it up, and I said absolutely not, because I think it shows, more importantly, if someone else does it. And they set it up, and they did a phenomenal job at it. And that goes on through, I had the pleasure of speaking in Cannon Falls. There's so many people that have started rallies and started conversations, uncomfortable conversations, that have not been black south of the river in these cities. And it's just astonishing the effort, the pain, the uncomfortableness they're willing to go through. Yes, it's something that we go through on a daily basis, but I will not shy or blink an eye to their sacrifice, because they don't have to. They don't have to go through that uncomfortable feeling of being an ally. And history has shown, without allies, we want to be too far we want to be as far as we are in this journey.
Right.
I think this really ties into MLK Day. One of the parts of the letter from Birmingham jail that Dr. Martin Luther King wrote, which, by the way, he wrote it in jail, in the margins of a Bible. It's very long, and anytime you read it, and I encourage everybody to go read it, just remember he wrote it in jail in the margins of a Bible. But anyway, he talks about the greatest stumbling block for black folks is not the KKK or the people in the white hoods, but it's the white moderate who prefers negative peace to the presence of justice. And he wasn't talking about political moderates, right, on a political spectrum. He was talking about white folks who are like, listen, I ain't burning crosses in people's yards. Shop wherever you want to shop. Don't date my daughter, it's fine, but I'm not going to yell the N-word at you. People who are like, I'm not doing the overtly racist things that I see, but I'm supporting the stuff that keeps us separate. I'd rather drain the pool in my community than let black folks swim here. I'd rather defund the park service for a decade in our city than let black folks play on the playground. I'd rather say, you know what? Let's stop funding our public schools so much because black kids go there. That's the folks he was talking about. And so when I think of the people who are allies, and the best moments of allyships are people who have divested themselves completely from the pyramid scheme of white supremacy to say, this is not helping any of us at all. And so I'm going to fully invest myself into black liberation, because that means we all get free. It's not a zero-sum game where it's one or the other. We know that when black folks are free, white folks are free too. It's why when Bacon's Rebellion happened in the 1600s, it was a coalition of black folks and poor white folks. What did they do? They told the poor white folks, listen, you'll never be as bad off as the black folks. Come over with us.
Yep.
It's why Dr. King was shot while he was talking and speaking to union activists, because unions often bring black and white and brown folks together to get the same wages and get the same health care. These are the things that people try to divide. It's the pyramid scheme of white supremacy that keep people vested. So the best allies divest themselves fully from that and realize that all of our liberation is adamantly tied up in black liberation.
Okay.
Beautifully said.
Yep.
I talk about this sometimes.
Many parts of the Midwest are increasingly diverse, but Rosemount area remains largely homogeneous. A homogeneous community, I apologize. Most people who live here walk into stores and restaurants where most people will look like them. Many are most always living in a racial comfort zone. What is it like for you?
Uncomfortable. Uncomfortable to say the least. There's been, multiple times where you're walking in as the only person of color and you get a couple looks and whatnot. And just like, for example, I was down in Florida just recently visiting, sick grandparents and whatnot. But at the time, I had braids in. And going into largely, white areas, braids in my hair, very Afro-centric features, I just felt even more out of place and even more of like a target. And it was like such a bad feeling because I was like, dang, I look good with these braids, I look sick, I'm fly, sorry to boast.
No, you did.
Yeah, I see it. I visualize it. You did look good.
But it was so crazy because while I was feeling as fly as ever, I also felt more targeted than ever because, and I'll admit, it's, an internalized racism of, braids make you ghetto, Grantham.
Yep.
Wearing your do-rag out in public makes you look a certain way.
Yep.
And there's so much to it where it's not just, white people enforcing it. It does go back to our own families and our own people of color enforcing discomfort. But it's just so crazy to see how comfort zones are so random, I'd like to say. I find comfort in so many different random people, but the second you go into a large general setting is when, you notice the switch up, you notice the tensions, because everybody's trying to play into everybody else's comfortability. So all your white friends are gonna play into their racist white friends' comfortability instead of standing behind you and being like, oh, are you uncomfortable? Like, let's leave, And I feel like that's why comfort zones are very rare as Black people, especially in the Midwest.
For sure. White supremacy is the comfort. That's the real, that's what we live in. Interrupting it's deeply uncomfortable, right? I'm a code switcher. That is absolutely something I excel at. A lot of biracial folks excel at that. We'll be over here doing the Cupid shuffle, and then over here, doing the step touch, right? It depends on who you're with and where you're at. It's a survival technique. We learn, when our parents teach us don't do this in public, it's not like, I don't want you to wear braids. It's like, I want you to survive, right? And so it feels like, and it's natural. It's easy. I do it without noticing. It's like a flip of the switch. I get very professorial. And I speak with very clear articulation. There's no slang. I'm very upright. Oftentimes my hair is straight. I'm wearing heels, right? It depends on where I am, but I know the ornaments that make me appear non-threatening, and I know how to code switch in a way that is least likely to bring me danger or reinforce that system of oppression. So it feels fine, but it's not good that it happens.
For me, I think the fastest thing that shoots to my head is the serenity prayer, right? So knowing you can change, knowing what you can't change, and knowing the difference between the two. I've just turned 39. If I shave, I look 22. But when going out in public and going into stores and going into communities, For me, I have developed the mindset, it is what it is. I'm here to shine my light. I'm here to be a rock star no matter what. And I don't even think about it anymore because I can't change it. I absolutely can't change it. But what I can do is be an amazing advocate for black men. So that's what I can do for Grantham. When I was growing up through high school, I made sure that I was the best I could be so the next black kid that goes into the store or goes into the high school, that goes into a neighborhood, and having neighbors call the police on them because it's dark at night, and a black kid's walking to his house that he's lived in for 10 years through their backyard, I'm gonna make sure I act the right way. So that's what my brain goes to is, I mean, I'm sure we've all been through it. You go into a store, you're looking for something, you don't find it, and you feel really guilty walking out that store without buying something because you're thinking, like, oh, I'm sure all eyes, all cameras are on me. Now, it may be the case, it may not be the case, but I've been approached enough to feel that way in stores where I just know something's not on about that customer service. Mm-hmm. So I've just taken the light of being the best advocate I can for black men and even black women in that general state, because if I can't fix the amount of people and amount of diversity that community has, or that the community or the stores get through traffic, I'm darn sure gonna let them know that, hey, not all of us or any of us at that factor are a threat to you, to your business, or to your community. And that's where I go with that.
I mean, I just want to put a fine point on that too, because what you're talking about is the burden and labor of being perfect so that other black people can survive. I mean, that's bananas, right? Like, you had to go through school being perfect so that the next black kid that went there wasn't judged by some, crap you did.
Yep. But I think of it, the staff is passed, right? So Martin Luther King, they marched in suits, right? 3-piece suits. They were getting attacked by dogs.
And they still wrote that they were, looters and burners and that they were tearing down neighborhoods.
They got beat like dogs. They got attacked. They were burned. They were murdered. But yet they still marched. So if I can't take that mentality, right? If I can't take that mindset, I mean, why did he?
I hear that. I hear that.
It's at the very least,
the ancestral,
right? I'd rather take the latter versus the former on that one, right? So I think we'll pass the staff. I hate to say it, but my children are going to march this march at some regards, right? And my children's children. I'm not naive to think that
will outlive
that 2025 is let freedom ring.
Check.
Right. Check.
Right.
Yeah. On to aliens. No. It is what it is. So.
Absolutely. How did you experience the Black Lives Matter movement living outside the cities? How was the impact different living in Rosemount? Do you feel like it was ignored, not recognized in this community, and how did it affect you?
Take it, Grantham.
I felt like I was watching one of those silent movies. Back in the old days, when you had motion picture, you didn't have any audio, right? So it was just everybody waving their hands around, but you didn't hear anything. And that's what it felt like watching all of our allies and white friends in Rosemount. I saw them waving their hands like madmen, acting all upset, but they were so quiet doing it. And social media plays a large part into this, and there's this performative activism that I see in high schoolers that is just obnoxious, and it's the most infuriating thing ever, because when I go to post about something, I'm loud, I'm opinionated. And granted, that's seen as ghetto, out of line, but I don't care. But what white people don't understand is that when I'm out here spewing lines, when I'm out here dicing facts, and all you can give me is after the meeting, behind the scenes, oh, that was really good, that was a nice job. No, where were you out on the battlefield with me giving me that validation on the field in front of everyone. Because what it takes when we sit at the table full of white people is for that one other white person to sit there and start nodding their head, for the rest of the Nimrods to start nodding their heads, you know? It takes, like you said, allyship, white people to help our movement. And that's not what I felt or saw during any of this. And what I would see was very minimal, and that sometimes what felt like true allyship, but a lot of it just felt like a silent moving picture. It was very disappointing and sad.
I hear that.
For myself, when it comes to the Rosemount, the community of Rosemount, in regards to Black Lives Matter and that whole movement, personally, I was floored and impressed. And I know I'm coming from a different perspective as Grantham, because we did have a rally. And I'm telling you, I was probably 6 of 900 and something students in my freshman class. And I never thought in 1,000 years that this community would have that type of event that's so, it's fire, right? Like, it's very, very heated. And to see as many people that came for that event when it was about to storm was mind-blowing for me. And over the years, I've been trying to really, really hone in on perspective. Because I understand they would never know what it is to walk in our shoes as a black man. I would never know what it is to walk in a white man's shoes. It's just not their reality or mine. But I saw people that are willing to learn. And as I've gone, I used to battle Grantham. I used to, my trigger fingers turned into Twitter fingers, right? I was typing on Facebook years ago and just battling people. And I realized nothing I say will ever change their opinion. Either they have to research it or experience it themselves firsthand. And they literally have to live that situation, or they have to do some research, like open up, go to a rally, start watching different speakers and educators, and open up a history book and see oh, this is what redlining is. It's actually a real thing. Oh, this is what happened to the factories that were in cities and they moved to the suburbs and, black people couldn't move out there. That's the only real movement I've seen. And the fact that people in Apple Valley, Eagan, Burnsville, Cannon Falls, Rosemount, our hometown, were willing to look. Hey, I'm a believer in ripple effects. All it takes is for one butterfly wing to start a hurricane, right? As they say, or one pebble to start a tidal wave. That's all it needs. So if 300, 400, 15 people come out and they have a child and they teach that child what they learn, and that child's the new president of the United States 50 years down the line, taken from what their parents learned at something that we've contributed, that's all I need. So I've always spoke, even in my career, training in health and nutrition, all you need is one person. And I think that Rosemount itself as a community and my tribe that I've surrounded myself, I'm blessed enough to just be surrounded by people that like to hear me talk. Not saying you all do, but I was joyed. I had joy. I was filled with seeing hope. And all it takes is one person to start something major, as we know. So
I deeply invested in the movement for Black Lives and the Black Lives Matter movement. They are the same, and Black liberation as a whole. It was a little bit of a bifurcation of what was happening in the cities and what was happening here. To see people in the streets, right? Like George Floyd was murdered and we all watched it happen on a video. And to see the response, and when I worked for our Attorney General, Jamar Clark was murdered 100 yards from his office. Philando was murdered on Facebook and we all saw it. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't like this is the first time I'd ever seen it. I went to Philando and Jamar's funerals. So for me, it was traumatic, to be honest. But it was also, what Jake was saying, we saw some things happen here in the suburbs. We saw people turn out, want to do stuff. We are in a pandemic. And so I think that movement is good, but we should look to this definition of anti-racism that Ibram Kendi has put out there as a person who supports anti-racist policy through their actions or expressing anti-racist ideas. And I think that's our next step. Mm-hmm. And I always feel like that's the last, this calendar or this school year, Lakeville Public Schools said, you can't put Black Lives Matter stuff up in your schools because it's a political statement.
Right. But the Confederate flag can still be in parking lots in some of these schools, right?
So Black liberation is now political. This is our survival. This is our freedom. And so that's kind of what it felt like, this bifurcation where we're having two different conversations, but one has been going on for a really long time in the cities. And we're just starting that conversation. And so I want to give space and grace to that, and also call out to the fact that white supremacy and the harm it causes is an emergency for every Black person alive right now. Grantham doesn't get another sophomore year. Jake doesn't get another 39th year. I don't get another 39th.
Well, if you times it by 2, I do.
Whatever year, right?
78.
So every day that we don't solve this, every day that white supremacy is the predominant and prevailing structure in this society, in this world, it's harming those people that you love.
Yep.
And so some folks can come out and they can say, I want to learn more, or they can come out and listen, they go home, but we go home and we still live on under that oppressive system. And so that's a little bit what it felt like. It felt like a little bit in the cities that everybody was feeling the full rage that we should all feel all the time about how bad white supremacy is.
Agreed.
And then here we were like, let's have a conversation, which is good. But also this is the conversation. White supremacy is harmful. It's harming all of us. And so I think that there was this moment of feeling like, we're doing it. What are we going to do next, right? I think that's a little bit of what it felt like.
Absolutely.
And it's the mindset, too, is to echo the conversation, it needs to start, because the baby is never going to walk without taking that very first step.
Agreed.
So I just don't want to downplay that, you know what I'm
For sure.
saying?
Yeah, it's really important.
But
we live in the state with the worst racial disparities between white and Black people, and have for a really long time.
Right.
And so
yes.
we, I want us to be, this is one of those things that's like the serenity prayer. What can't you change? Can't change the fact that we haven't been having this conversation. But when I ran for office in 2016, I ran as exactly who I am. And people were like, you should not say Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And I was like, I'm probably going to say it because I'm Black and my life matters. And people elected me anyway because they were like, hey, she tells the truth about what she thinks. But that was the advice I was given, right? So it's like we can be further along. We can have this conversation and take action. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
We should be further. We should be.
We can be. We can take action while people still learn to join us in action.
Agreed.
Continuing with your earlier statement about the Lakeville schools, and we also had an issue over here at Rosemount of what people were misinterpreting was the Black Lives Matter movement as a political statement rather than a moral and ethical movement.
Right.
And it was so frustrating and annoying to watch white people debate our lives, because we've experienced.
Say that again.
It was frustrating to watch white people debate our lives, because for so long, white people already did, So for people to sit back and be like, I can't support the Black Lives Matter movement, it just doesn't align with my political compass, no, are you kidding me? Black people are being killed, we are being oppressed, we are being murdered on the streets that we walk in, and you have the audacity to sit here and tell me that people's humanity and rights to exist don't matter?
History repeats itself, right? The Black Panther Party. And same thing, they made it to a militia or a malicious kind of that party itself, of Black people trying to empower other Black people in power and businesses and home life. But what did they do? Government, society-wise, they made sure that they took that narrative out that we're supporting each other, right? And they made us a threat. They made that group a threat. So that's the fastest way to stop a movement, right? I was once told, well, why doesn't the black community get a major leader, right, to walk them down the path to lead the show? Think about all the major black leaders that we've had. What happened? Either they get killed, right, or they're in Cuba, they get estranged to Cuba, right? They're banned from the country. Like every major black leader, every major black group, they have it continuously is demeaned and broken down as a threat.
Right.
And that's the only narrative they're going to push. So now it's going to be a political threat, right? To they nub this out, this movement out, and then as history repeats itself, mostly like 80 years in the United States, the economic and the pattern of it is that 40 years from now, another movement is going to pop up. We got to just make sure that everyone knows that this movement, what it truly stands for, is those words, that Black Lives Matter. And we just want to do, and that's the very basis of it. We said it before. Matter is not a big word. Like, matter is...
It's like the bare minimum?
Right. It's subpar at the best. And so, yeah.
And I think it's important to understand that the movement for Black Lives is a continuation of the civil rights movement,
Yes.
which was a continuation of the abolitionist movement. So these are not like things that just happen. Like, these are continuations of movements of the movement for liberation. And I think so often we can get really bogged down in this understanding of as if so it's MLK Day. We all saw the posts from the FBI, which I'm sorry, surveilled Dr. King and threatened him and did terrible things to him. We see that as if it lives outside of context. And we shouldn't place the movement for Black Lives outside of the context for the broader movement for Black liberation, which literally started about as soon as Black people arrived on these shores as enslaved people. It's just been called different things. There have been different leaders. We are not a monolith. We are all autonomous people with thoughts and feelings and ideas. Right. So we don't need one leader. We need liberation. And there have been a number of people and movements that have stepped forward to do that.
And just quick continuation of that, what's so flawed and ridiculous about trying to appoint one Black leader who can represent all of us, you know?
When do we vote?
Right.
At what council?
And it's just so frustrating because personally, I had a dilemma coming and doing this because I was like, what do I know about, because I live in Lakeville. I go to a Rosemount school, and I've been in part of this Rosemount community, but I live in a different city. So I experienced living in Lakeville as well as, being here. So I'm like, who am I to talk about the experiences of, living in Rosemount? Granted, I'm largely a part of the community and whatnot. But there's so many, and like I was saying earlier, how, privileged I am to be going to, such an educated school and to be getting this education. There are so many other people of color out there who are not being able to have their voices heard like mine, where I'm like, what makes me, I start to question myself. I'm like, what makes me entitled to speak for everyone? And that is what is so mind-boggling. I still don't understand it, but it's I also have to remind myself my voice does matter. It's just I need to make sure I'm also passing the microphone along when I'm done.
I think it's important to remember. Your voice makes a difference, and it's kind of like what I talked about in the quote from Dr. King was, being silent helps nobody,
Right.
And I think that's important to be remembered. Is that the fact that you have a voice, doing nothing with it helps nobody, So. A popular thing we hear from white people today is, I've been discriminated against too. All races deal with racist behavior at some point. How does that affect you, and what would you say in response to that?
Well, Aaron, you could take it, but I just want to say the sheer definition of racism shows how that cannot be true. So, just the sheer definition of racism shows how it cannot be true. But Aaron, you take it. I'm sorry.
The part where it's all races deal with racist behavior at some point, Ooh, you're gaslighting. They're gaslighting us. What white people or whomever are doing when they say, all races deal with racist behaviors, they're silencing our voices with other people's pain. While other people's pain, it's a whole different conversation. It's a whole different movement. It's a liberation. Granted, it should all be brought to light, but if your statement is only to silence our voices, it's disgusting. It's out of line. That's not okay. And that's what I just find the most frustrating and annoying.
I hear that. So I'll say two things. One, the part of this question was, I've been discriminated against too. So white folks, it's not to say that you have not experienced hardship. It just has not been because of the color of your skin. And when I talk about the pyramid scheme of white supremacy, part of that is telling white folks that, you're not going to have it that bad. And then finding out the opposite is deeply troubling. And that is the whole point of why I say it's a pyramid scheme, is because white supremacy sucks for everyone, including white people. And buying into the notion that it's not going to suck is why the anger exists. But the other part is that racism is rooted in anti-blackness. Anti-blackness is the belief that black people are not fully human. It's why we saw the gynecological field was created because one man did experiments on enslaved black women without their permission, without anesthesia, because of the belief that black people do not feel pain the same way white people do. It's why they justified slavery.
Still goes on today.
And it still lives on today. A study of medical students currently in medical school, 50% still believed that black skin does not feel the same pain that white skin does. That is the systemic racism that we're talking about, right? And those beliefs, live on in other ways in healthcare and blah, 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 blah. So all that to say is, yes, white people do experience discrimination. They experience hardship. They experience poverty. They experience lack of access to equity and capital and money. And none of it is because of the color of their skin. Racism, and especially anti-black racism, means that all black people are harmed by a system that is meant to dehumanize and devalue us. When you saw Officer Chauvin kneel on the neck of George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and stare blankly into a teenage girl's cell phone camera while he killed a man, a black man, that is the dehumanization that we are talking about. When Breonna Taylor is shot in her own home for sleeping in her own home, that is the dehumanization we are talking about. When black children who are 4 years old are arrested for throwing tantrums in preschool, that is the dehumanization we are talking about. That is the root of racism, is anti-blackness. All racism stems out from there. That is what we have to root out. And white supremacy is the belief that white people are superior to people of color and therefore should be dominant over them. That is the system we have to dismantle.
So I want to shine light on the question. And I do understand, I can appreciate why someone says, I've been discriminated against too in a racial format for what they think. So growing up, I've had multiple friends that uncles, parents did not want them hanging out with a black man or black boy at that time. And the majority of the stories came because, when my uncle was in high school, there was a black kid that always beat him up. So therefore, he doesn't like black people. And that just always, just triggered me. I get triggered sometimes. I get triggered for the mere fact that I've been jumped by 4 white boys growing up. And I took care of my own, but I still remember that. But yet, I can't go out through life never talking to a white person because I've been called the N-word more times than I can imagine, playing sports, in school, online. So it boggles my mind how one bad incident with a person from a different color can make you not only turn yourself off to a race, but make sure your nieces or your nephews or your kids feel that same about that race. And so when they come from the phrase white privilege, and I know there's debate about it, but what I see as a privilege is that, hey, you did experience that. I'm sorry that you experienced that situation. How did it make you feel? Yeah, it was pretty bad. Can you think of any other situations? Oh, yeah, there was another time when you were 22 and you went to Georgia and someone said a black man said something to you? Any more times? No, that's it? 2? Well, doggone it, that's a privilege to me that you can only think about 2 racist moments in your life. Well, where do I start my biography from? Like, do you have 5 hours where I can go down the list of my racial experiences? And I think that's where that stems from, where people say, hey, I've experienced it too. Yes, you've experienced it once or twice. I bet you stubbed your toe once or twice too. It hurts. But comparing that to someone that's been in a car accident where they're paralyzed, which one's worse?
Well, I think it gets to the point too where it's like, you could have a bad experience with a white person, but you have not been reinforced in your belief that now all white people are bad by all the systems and all of the, the predominant narrative in our country, right? So in Minnesota, we still have in our Constitution, slavery shall be illegal except for punishment for a crime. And that is because of the ascribed criminality to black people after slavery was ended.
Yes.
Right? That is a system. And so people are justified then in saying those things. And then it's reinforced in not just you can't hang out with my kid, but I don't hire you at this place, or we don't have people who look like that here.
Right.
You can't come here.
Right.
That's the difference. It's the difference between an instance and a system.
Right.
Yeah. Are we taking questions from the audience now?
I'm going to get to that in just a second. We're going to go to the last one, and then I do have one. What are you most proud of as being part of the black community, and what one thing would you want people to know about you in regards to your blackness, the black community?
I'm unapologetically black. I'm a black man. I love it. I would never change it for anything in this world. And I love that my children have black skin, because to me, blackness holds so much more. I think this country the United States of America would not be the United States of America without black men and black women. Between their blood, their sweat, their tears, their fashion, the foods we eat. I mean, doggone it, chicken wings. They made a whole restaurant called B-Dubs. And if you revert back, in slavery, the wing was the worst part. That was the garbage part of the chicken. I mean, we have there's TVs and like 50 different flavors of beer at this restaurant. But with that said, I love the challenge, and I love that I was blessed with the opportunity to help humanity deal with what's going on. It's a blessing, and I think being a black man, and I imagine my mother would say, and Miss Aaron would say, being a black woman has been a badge of honor because it shows sheer strength. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's another race in the United States of America that has and continues to endure a type of racism that would most likely make others crumble if it switched. And I think that's a big fear right now, that people feel like, okay, if we don't hold this supremacy, what are they going to do on the back end if they start getting power, right? That's not it's not going to happen, right?
That's not how liberation works.
Right. That's not going to happen. But with that said, I want people to know that perspective is everything for me. I understand it. I want to learn from them as much as I want them to hear from me. And I think that, real quick, what I've realized, I lived in North Carolina for 4.5 years. And I helped one of my friends down there open up a tavern, a private party. And the patrons, most of them are from the South. right? Some were missing teeth, not meaning anything, but they were what I feared as being a black man from Minnesota, like I may not make it out alive type style. And when I started working and serving and talking to these patrons, they were amazing. And they reminded me of my black friends in the inner city, right? So these are white people from the country, almost exactly the same type mind and mentality than the black people in the city. And that just made me realize how close we truly are. And that reverts back to what Aaron said in the 1600s. Like, hey, there's a lot more poor white people and black people than there are the 1%. So we need to make sure we divide them before they realize the power they will have, right? And so division makes money. And that's where we're at today. They're going to do everything they can to demean, to separate, to make sure that the powers to be don't combine, because that makes money and that keeps the ball rolling in the direction that they want it to. So, long-winded question, answer.
Oh
but
my
thank
gosh,
you.
amen though, that's so true.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am a proud black woman. I also have proximity to whiteness. I am light-skinned. And it is important that I name that because it is part of the privilege that I hold. I am proud to be black. I will say that it is, to remind myself to find black joy and to celebrate my black excellence, I have to do that because generally, society and the world won't do that for me. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of exhausting, right? Mm-hmm. To know that I have to find that, we have to give it to each other because society doesn't do that for us. In fact, it does the opposite, right? And it's why we have to pull it out and name it. It's why we have to say Black Lives Matter.
Hello.
It's why we have to say black joy, black excellence, right? Because otherwise, people don't associate those things together. So I'm proud to be an excellent black woman. And I'm proud of just us, right? 2020 was a rough year. We lost leaders. We lost 1 in 5 black Americans to COVID.
Kobe.
I'm just proud that I am here. And I'm proud to be in this community because I believe that people want it to be different. And I want to be with folks as we find the way for it to be different.
Yes.
Well said. For me personally, I wasn't always in love with being black, and I'll admit it. At times it felt like my race was my enemy, and that is so dehumanizing. And just imagine this, just a pit of self-hatred.
Yes.
But in response to what you said, no one's gonna love us unless we don't love ourselves, and that's something that I think, especially as a kid, growing up queer, growing up black, it's learning self-love and self-worth is going to make that enemy your best friend.
Yes.
Because now my blackness is not seen as what sets me apart. It is now seen as what makes all of us standing up here the same. And we share that experience. And then it now gives me the power to establish that my blackness is whatever I want it to be.
Yeah.
It's flamboyant, it's fashionable, it's gay, it's loud, it's sitting up here on the panel. It's timeless, it's non-negotiable, and it will not be disregarded. And that's what I think is what makes me so proud to be black, is to be able to paint my blackness out to be whatever I want it to be.
I love that.
Good.
Very, very well said. So we've gone through our pre-selected questions, but we do have a question from the site, and we're running close on time here. So the question is this: what things can be done in Rosemount to make you feel supported in daily life?
Grant, you take it.
I'm not going to say constant, but there is a fine line, like I said before, between disregarding situations, avoiding situations, white silence and whatnot. I think, kind of just the borderline minimum is just a, hey, I know this happened. How are you? Is there any way I can support you? Because I get how intense and kind of the white guilt that, a lot of white people go through. And if the least that you can do is just be a support block, just a talking wall to your black friends, I think that is so important. Because there's been multiple times where I've been experiencing something that I just, can't really talk about, and it's not something that I just want to, start a conversation about. But if someone, sat there and asked me just like, hey, is this something you want to talk about? I'm willing if you ever need me. That is so beneficial and so highly appreciated as a Black person.
Yeah, I'll say this one's easy. Google characteristics of white supremacy culture. And in this article, I think it's from the late 90s, early 2000s, it lists off characteristics of white supremacy culture: perfectionism, sense of urgency, either or thinking, on and on and on. Quantity over quality. There are antidotes to that, to white supremacy culture in that article. Find the one that you do the most. Find the one that shows up in your life the most. Identify it. Live out those antidotes. Talk about it. Talk about white supremacy. It's okay to name. We all live in it every day. I hate to name it like, if sharks are the problem, it's actually a water problem, because it implies that it's unchangeable, and it totally is. But it is the system we live in. Talk about it. Get comfortable naming it. And be okay with messing up. Be okay with messing up. You're not going to get it perfect. We're all dismantling this together. But you have to say, okay, this is wrong. I want to do something about it. Here's my first step. After you take that first step, take another. Like, you got to do it one day at a time. There's no passivity in this liberation movement. And white people have to be invested in divesting from white supremacy in order for it to actually be dismantled. So those would be my first steps.
So for me, I've thought about this over and over and over again for a very long time. And undoubtedly, beg, plead, I can fill my own battery. I've been in the game almost 40 years. I no longer need for outside forces to tell me I'm worthy of greatness, respect, all that. But I demand, ask, beg, plead for your child's education to change. In middle school, my education system of slavery was roots. Roots. So being the only Black kid, and every time the N-word dropped, all eyes went on me. I hated Black History Month. I hated it because it was super uncomfortable, and I learned nothing except for sometimes I'm going to be called Toby or Kunta Kinte. When it comes, one of the biggest things, and I'll make this quick, as I show Disney to my children, which not a huge fan, but of course they love it. When you look at movies like the original Lion King or Aladdin, the bad guys have dark skin, okay? When you look at the new movies, Black heroes or Black princesses always turn into an animal or a soul. They can never be a Black prince, a Black superhero, a Black king, and just stay that way the whole movie. I don't want to fly off into the sky and turn into a phoenix or anything. I just want to be an amazing Black man that shows how amazing I am throughout the whole movie that my kids are being brainwashed with. And not saying brainwashed, because right now, if you look at studies and they line kids up, 4, 5, 6 years old, and they put dolls on the table, it's all on YouTube, you can see this. Who's the bad guy? Who's the nice person? Who's the pretty one? It is never, the good characteristics and the amazing characteristics are never the Black or darker skinned dolls. They only get the bad ones. And it starts, I've checkmarked my generation. I think we could change, but I don't see it happening. But for my kids' kids, if we change our education system when it starts from elementary school, middle school, and high school, because I'm almost sure I'm speaking for the panel, but we can't go to Europe because we don't know, we can't go to Africa because we don't know what tribe our family originates from. But in school, they teach you, hey, if you're Scottish, you go here, this happened, the Colosseum over here, or Spain, or England, or so forth and so on. The majority of the students in the class, they want to travel when they get older to places that their family's from. Well, in our education system, the majority of Black people have no idea where they're from, and we don't know why. That's not even explained to us. So, yes, as adults, we can be kinder to each other. We can be more empathetic. We can be more caring, right? And more compassionate. Yes, that's a human trait that everyone should have. But when it comes to the generations to come, teach them. Teach them and demand that things change. And if they don't, take it upon yourself to get different color dolls, right? Get books that characterize people with darker skin or other skin than your own, right? And that's the biggest thing to me. Like, teach the youth and just push it just as much as you push any other narrative that you put on them, right? Teach them about different music and why that music's important and where that music comes from, right? Where that 808 drum, like beat drum comes from. It's not European, right? It's an African drum they hear in country, rock and roll. Like a lot of that stuff, the Beatles, where'd they get a lot of the songs? Elvis, where did he get his music from?
Black people.
Right, so there it is, it's education. And once they start appreciating dark skin and other cultures, they'll start to love. They'll start to love us. So I'll end with this. Like, to tell me or to tell any of us that color doesn't matter, or you don't see color, or you don't tell your kids to see color, you don't raise them that way, stop. Let them see every single color, because it's just like the colors of the rainbow. And then you teach them about each color and where that color comes from. Because as the colors of the rainbow, they love them all, right? They always draw rainbows because that's intriguing to a child. Imagine if you did that with different peoples and different cultures and different religions, right? If we did that, I'm sure we'll be okay.
Very well said. And we are running close on time, so I want to wrap this up with, this is just the beginning of the conversations. There are much more conversations to be had, at in your own homes, at the table, with other people. The conversations need to continue. And so I want to thank everybody very much for their time tonight. Panelists, thank you for your time, for being here. I'm going to pass the mic on for one more thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Michael. I'm Bill Drosty, Mayor of Rosemount, and on behalf of the One Rosemount group, which is leaders from our schools, churches, businesses, community, and city, I want to say thank you, Michael, and to our panelists for adding your voices to our communities. In Rosemount, I moved here 33 years ago. We were about 9,000 people. Today, we're 26,000. We'll be adding 10,000 in the next 10 years. In Dakota County, we'll be adding 120,000 in the next 20 years. And the only way we can have strong communities is as people move to our communities, they all have to have a voice. So you being the first group that we've had, like Michael said, we intend to do 2 or 3 more sessions, and we may continue this on throughout the years. Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much again.
Thank you very much.
And best wishes to all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.